This show is brought to you by Databril, the scalable Amazon PPC management for large Amazon sellers and brands. Visit sellersessions.com/agency for more details. Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today I bring in Sean Smith and Brian Johnson. How you doing?
Doing fantastic.
Doing awesome, Danny. Thanks for having us again, man. It's amazing.
No worries. Whereabouts are you guys at the moment? You still in Austin, Brian, are you?
I'm actually south of Austin. I'm closer to San Antonio now, but basically I commute up to Austin every week also. So
what you been working on recently? I know you got the new launch of the agency, haven't you?
Yeah, you know what, the Canopy Management Agency is probably my biggest my biggest focus. Certainly any client who's listening to this would would appreciate that. Yeah. Of course I do have software course and community and that kind of stuff, but really the agency is demanding the most amount of time right now because of staff training and process development and software development and all these kind of things that go along with making sure that we get everything not just good but perfect. And that's a tall order. But
yeah, Sean, what's been going on with you since last time we spoke?
So what's going on with me? So we've kind of like I haven't really been taking on any new accounts on the agency side. We launched like a training program with Taylor. So I do the sponsored products. He does the AMS. It's a 7-week training program, and that's been keeping us busy in terms of because we've got our we got our customers now, and then we've got our content to create and all that stuff. It's a lot of content. It's a lot of content.
Yeah, I don't envy you guys having to write courses and update them. I used to write courses back in the day in the music industry, and every time a software comes out and you've got to change all the screen grabs, you've got to change all the processes, and yeah, it's a heavy lot of work. So I don't envy either you two. But so today, a few subjects we want to cover. So let's just kick off, Brian, with you. Give us a guideline to metrics. We're discussing this prior to the call, but
I think a lot of new and frankly, some established sellers, they're one of the biggest questions that they have is, I'm advertising, but do my numbers look right compared to everybody else? They want to know, do they fit in? Am I doing things within the range that is expected? And anytime that I meet with a client or, like a coaching client, for instance, or look at any new account to evaluate, the first things I'm always looking for is the click-through rate and the conversion rate. So I'm primarily looking at what the sales funnel is. How good of the job are the ads doing at getting the shopper from search to my listing? And then how good of a job are we doing from getting them from listing to purchase? So click-through rate, conversion rate. The standard that I usually go off of for click-through rate is I typically expect something in the 0.3% up to maybe a 1%. I used to have a lower number, like a 0.8%, but I've seen trending over the past year or two that's gradually gotten a little bit better. I don't know, because of better targeting from Amazon too, but 0.3 to 1% on the click-through rate would be normal. Yeah. Above that would be great unless it's click fraud, which is a different evaluation. Yeah. And then below, like say 0.2% is kind of the danger zone. That's a red flag that there's some relevance mismatch occurring.
Well, not just that, it's pricing mismatch as well. You might have something whereby the average price of the page is $15-16.99, but someone's selling that and they're not a known brand and they're selling it for $49.99 running PPC ads. Yeah. So obviously that ends up becoming the ratio between click-through rate and the impressions is quite poor.
Well, and so one of the checks that I usually have people do is it's kind of a validation check, I guess, or I don't know what you want to call it, but you take that search term and whatever search term that you think that you're targeting, you search on Amazon and you look at the page 1 results, and then you compare your ad or your listing may not be on page 1, but you compare. How would my ad fit in? How would my title, how would my image, how would my price, how would my reviews, all that fit in compared to everything else on page 1? If you stick out like a sore thumb, not just to yourself, but to all the shoppers. They're going to dismiss you, and your click-through rate is going to be a lot lower because you clearly don't fit in. Yeah, that's one of the common mistakes that people make is they'll hire some like a black hat service or something like that to get them onto page 1 for a keyword, and then they scratch their head going, how come nobody's coming to my listing?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't belong.
Yeah, you don't fit in.
You're not even close.
But that's the difficulty as well in terms of, obviously we on our agency 80% is automated, but it's that 20% there. This is why we've got algorithm expert and data scientists. But you still need to be able to look at the search results pages. You still need to have context to the data that's presented to you to understand the full picture. And that's where the human touch comes in as well. And I think people miss that, is that they sit in spreadsheets all day. They might be ninjas chopping it all up, the data, can't work out what's going on. It's a bit like when people don't know enough about their product, but they don't go out and speak to people in the marketplace and put it into people's hands. That's how you really get the information. That you need to combine that human intelligence along with the data intelligence as well.
Yeah. Plus, we use that's a good point. Like with the PPC side, we use that's why we audit. Like when we work with new clients, we look at the business report as well, because that'll give us some feedback on how, like, which products we should be managing and how they're doing on just overall. Like you can look at the number of sessions in the last 30 days in the unit session percentage and just download that and just go through and be like, hey, like which ones are worth advertising, which ones aren't, and and based on like what Brian said, like, those two metrics will tell you a lot about whether or not the thing fits in or not in the search results. And it'll help us as agencies, because it'll help with managing it, because it's really hard to manage a product that does poorly organically.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's definitely where we look at conversion rates as well. Yeah. So.
That's definitely.
The other portion.
You need to. We can chat about that bit later as well. But is there any specific categories, like for instance, baby category? There's a lot of shoppers are looking for gifts for their newborns, etc. Maybe do a lot more window shopping than buying. Do you ever find any of that is kind of rattles your data a bit?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. For instance, I mean, that's one of the common things I look at is. Anything that has, and it's not so much the category. I mean, the category and the product type are definitely going to have a propensity for this, but it's really about how much, okay, kind of leaping forward there. It's like the lower conversion rate is oftentimes because the buying process is slowed down. The buying process is slowed down because the shopper gets into analysis paralysis because there's so many options for them to look at. And in certain product categories, there's a lot of different product variations, both dominant and secondary variations that they can look at, whether that's size, color, print, pattern, boy, girl, it's those kind of things like baby clothing is famous for being like single-digit conversion rates because the buying process is slowed down, because not only do you have a dozen different variations on this one product, on that baby bandana or whatever, but all your competitors have the same thing too, have a dozen also. And so there's all these different colors and patterns. You're basically, the type of product it is forcing the shopper to become a window shopper, even if they're a decision maker. They either they leave quickly, or they sit there for hours trying to figure out, what pattern or colors do I really like? And they'll click through. And so then everybody's getting, these ad clicks and these sessions, but they're not really converting because they get this burnout. They may eventually purchase something, but anytime you slow down the buying process, introduce confusion or doubt, doubt would be like, is this the right color or the right pattern for my daughter's baby, whatever.
It's called decision fatigue.
Yeah.
Decision fatigue. They did like a study on that where like they gave like people a bunch of like jelly. I could be totally wrong. I mean, I'm trying to like remember it. But
make it up as you go. No.
Well, there's a few.
It was a jelly study. Okay.
I think so. Where they gave people a bunch of like decisions, like a bunch of options, and it was harder for them to make an option rather than when they were given a small amount of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this whole decision fatigue, people determine it as real in the sense that people like Steve Jobs would wear the same clothes every day because that's one less decision he would need to make, and then obviously you get the diminishing returns as you get further into the day, and the more and more decisions you make, the more and more tired you become. So if you imagine being online as a shopper, jumping through all of these different images, flicking between all these different options in terms of variations, you see some listings that got 60 variations on. On one side, Heinz baked beans is 57 varieties or something it says on there, but then some people say that, you'd have the decisions would come in three, they'd launch 3 different colors or 3 different options, because then that reduces the decision fatigue, which maybe bleed into our data,
Right. Yeah. I think that there's too many cases where the seller is trying to follow what their competition is doing and not really aware of factors like decision fatigue. Now, that also kind of begs the question. It's like, okay, do I introduce 3 versus 20 like my competitor?
Yeah.
Or do I go to a completely different product?
Yeah.
That doesn't have so many variations? Because you're talking about, it becomes exponential when you've got a lot of competition.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. And what have you noticed have you seen any weird trends on, huge listings with multiple variations? We're not talking about 5 or 6, ones with 20 or 30 variations. Have you seen anything there that's a bit strange in the data?
I mean, I usually see weighted ones. I don't know, Sean, if you've got an opinion on that one, but.
Dude, I'll be honest, just for my own, I try to actually not work with things that have a lot of variations just because it's so hard. It's just, I don't know, man. It's really, really hard. I like really high velocity listings.
Right.
And, and like Brian said, things without a lot of decisions. Cause I feel like, that when you have those variations, the unit session percentage is a lot lower. And for me, I don't know, for me, I just like the high. So I haven't seen anything either, mainly because I don't really work with a lot of high variation items.
But you made some interesting points there. Do you mind if we pick that apart? Brian, do you have any other information there? It's interesting that you would shy away from a listing with that amount of variation. Is it purely down to the difficulty in terms of managing it on conversion rate and keeping the client happy, for instance, because their conversion rate is low?
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, you figure is that anytime we're looking at an account, it's not like we're looking for the easy route. That's not it. It's more of a case of, let's be honest here, is that there's going to be an investment in advertising. If we're responsible for advertising, but if you give us a product that has a $10 price tag and a 5% conversion rate, that's going to be a lot harder for us to accomplish the data with any reason of break even, any reasonable break even costs involved. And so it's going to be frustrating for you because it's going to cost a lot in order for us to find out who that target audience is using the advertising.
Yeah.
And it's not very sustainable with such low conversion rates and low price points. And so those are because if there's a lot of competition that has driven the price down and has introduced all these different variations and drove down the conversion rate, then you always have to have the premium listing on your product and continue to invest in your product listing quality and your product quality, only to have advertising spend all that money because it just doesn't produce the same kind of results that like Sean says, like a high velocity product that has a decent margin and a decent conversion rate is a lot easier because we can take $1 in advertising and turn that into $5 in sales versus a product that has a single digit conversion rate.
Yeah.
Something closer to 5% for conversion rate, you're always going to be you're always going to be break even at best. You're always going to be fighting unless you get 3 or 4 keywords.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
no, go on. Sorry, Sean.
Oh, for me, it just boils down to expectations with working with an account. If I don't feel I can provide a return, then I'm not going to that's what it's all about is whether or not I believe I can provide the return. And if we have a bunch of variations and, everything's kind of spread out. I mean, I understand if you have variations and then one of them crushed it, it's a high velocity. There's one of them, but if they're really spread out, like Brian was talking about, and the conversion rate is on the lower end, then it's just really hard. And if you think about it, in terms of time and effort, what happens is that like, if you do all of these, like, these smaller volume SKUs, then, versus one, a few high velocity SKUs, it's just easier to work with for us as well. And we can provide a more predictable return, because the more SKUs you add into things and the less they perform, it's harder for me. It's always been like less predictable to track the performance and stuff. And, I'm not able to provide the return. And so if I can't provide the return, then, you're going to, this is just business 101. Like, if you can't provide an outcome that's equal to or greater than the fee that they put in, then, so then you're going to be on,
No, I totally agree that. I think it's very important for the audience that are managing their own accounts, because like you guys, we'll get people approach us who they're in the center of their own universe, right? So they're in their own products, they invest in it. It's something they do every day. They're passionate about it, and they can't always see the wood for the trees. So they come to you as an agency, you or me, whoever, and you have I believe, an obligation. That means is that you do your account audit. If you can't improve that account, then you have to be honest with the client, because it's too painful 3, 4, 5 months down the road that people get upset. I mean, I've had a potential client who really wanted to work with us, but I said to him, look, these are the issues that you're facing. I don't want you being pissed off with me in 3 months' time. I don't believe we can deliver because we can't turn water to wine. You've reached your breach in terms of the market. You're better off going out and looking at a new set of product lines. Just accept that you've reached your maximum, and then start to move sideways, start to get some more products rolling, and then maybe we can help you as a company. I think that's really important, because a lot of people can spend so much time bashing their head against the wall, thinking they're not very good at their PPC, or they're not doing a good job, or the people that are working for them are not doing very good, when in actual fact, there isn't no more room for growth.
Right. And that boils down to like goals and, really being good at goal setting and realistic with goal setting. So like, if you've been pounding your head for the past 60 days, that's telling you something. And so you should listen to it and figure out what realistically can you do. And so I understand you want to keep learning and testing, but you got to have a destination in mind. And, you always have to have a destination in mind. It has to be rooted in reality and data.
Not simply just double or triple your sales, but
what happened the last 2 months? You know what I mean? That's there's seasonality and stuff, but
that's what I was going to lead into. I was going to say,
we're all really good, but we're not magicians.
Let's talk seasonality, because it's very easy to get to that stage where you get panic without looking historically what's going on, and then start to tweak. So talk to me about, when you're hitting seasonal periods with your clients and stuff, what are the steps that you're taking so the audience would understand is how you're dealing with seasonality? Like, to give an example, let's just say all the main keywords are still ranking absolutely fine. There's no change in position. You're still number 1, 2, or 3, but your sales have gone down and your ACOS is starting to shift in the wrong direction. But it's the same for everyone else on page 1. How are you countering that, and what are the steps that you're taking?
Well, with seasonality, I think there's 2 pieces. In terms of just strictly performance, we usually let the market autocorrect, and then we make changes. So like, what we'll do is we'll either set new goals for the summer in terms of like, hey, like we're able to work at a higher, ACOS, or we'll just let the market tell us what's going on. So like, what'll happen is, and which is cool, because I'll explain it to the people I work with, and since they're larger accounts, they're totally willing to just be like, oh, okay, let's let the market tell us what's going on. So basically, what that means is you just keep everything as is, like pre-summer, and then what happens is once kind of the spend. Once like maybe the conversion rate drops and the traffic drops and things like that, that's when you correct, where they're doing like predictive, because then it allows us to see like, hey, maybe last summer we did better than this summer. So we're kind of allowing the market to autocorrect, and it's really an education piece. And that's the biggest thing, is like how you communicate to the people that you work with about it, like the words that you use and things like that, and then kind of getting them on board. Because even like the people I work with that have been selling for a while and are more veteran, like they still ask, which I think is very smart. I used to be like, man, you should know, but I think it's very smart because we have access to a lot of different accounts, and so we can give them that like, you know, more insightful overview of like what we're seeing.
We would have discussions, wouldn't we? Would say we're seeing seasonal trends going across, like sweeping across accounts. So
I referenced those discussions. I referenced everything. When it came to season, I referenced, you know, looking at the data, and then I referenced talking on my, you know, in my mastermind, my PPC mastermind with Brian, and you know, talking with you, Danny, on our last call, we talked about it. So, you know, I try to gather as much information from really, really qualified people, and then, you know, go out there and
Brian, you got some interesting takes on this, because sometimes you can confuse seasonality for what Amazon's businesses decisions are. Some of the changes they're making. Do you want to go into the AdWords thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, so for instance, you know, I mean, seasonality is one of those things where it's always easier to see it in hindsight, right? But that's one of the reasons why I had, a couple of years ago, I had published a chart that I'd put together regarding Google Trends on e-commerce platforms to kind of show the holiday season, the seasonality, the predictable holiday season within the United States. That chart is still around, but it's like 2 years old. So, but it still applies, is that anytime we run into any kind of, there's two events that usually occur as far as seasonality goes. Anything that's going to distract the shopper. In other words, shoppers who are often distracted by family being in the house, you know, or family in town, holidays, kids on break, you know, whether it's a 3-day weekend or a spring break or summer vacation, all those things distract a shopper from really focusing on what their intent is, trying to buy a product online. And so it slows down their decision making, creates that, you know, analysis paralysis, but really they become window shoppers because they're constantly distracted with something else going on in their room. They're probably surfing on their phone while their kids are playing video games or whatever. And so we can see where in the days leading up to any kind of a holiday weekend or a summer break or anything, where the conversion rates drop because the buying process gets slowed down because of distraction, and then it returns usually about a day or two after that event. After, like, say, we just went through, you know, Memorial Day weekend, usually the sales return a couple days after that. But then we have the three factors as far as seasonality right now. We had Memorial Day weekend, and that rolls into finals for kids, you know, for students. They're going into finals. They're going into graduations, whether that's high school or college graduations. And then right after that, we're rolling into summer. All of these things make basically May and June kind of a train wreck as far as overall sales volume and attention by the shopper. Amazon knows that, and Amazon is going to adjust their external advertising, whether that's through Google, you know, the Google advertising and retargeting advertising they do, the Facebook advertising, the follow-up emails. You've seen Amazon, the TV ads that they run, radio, all that kind of stuff. They're going to spend, they're not simply just spending, you know, an unlimited budget throughout the entire year. They put most of their money into where it's going to produce the greatest results on Amazon, drive the buying traffic. And they know that the conversion rates are lower during this season. And so they've also dropped their external advertising. Not completely, just, you know, maybe they've dropped it down to a quarter of what it normally is. And so what you'll see as an overall pattern, you don't necessarily see that within a single account or a single product, but you see it when you're looking at hundreds, if not thousands of accounts. You see where overall the sales volume and impressions, sessions, sales volume drop during this time of year. And that's one of the reasons why Amazon put Prime Day in July in order to counter that, because they knew that that's going to be the worst month of the year as far as sales. They stick this, you know, this hot, you know, they basically put Black Friday in the middle of all that, and it spikes up the sales again for them during the worst month of the year. They'll advertise heavily for Prime Day in order to drive shoppers back onto the platform in hopes that they keep them during the summer. And pull away, you know, that's another way that they can pull away from some of the other competition from Amazon. But then let's add in even one more factor that most people are not aware of is everybody was excited to see that Amazon was reintroducing the beta for the external ad network, but then they didn't realize that what Amazon did during that shift was because they're introducing the Amazon ad network for ad retargeting, they pulled away from their advertising on Google for Google retargeting.
Yeah.
And so that dropped at the same time they're starting to bring up this new platform. They haven't quite lined up yet. In other words, the Amazon ad network for retargeting hasn't outpaced their ad spend on Google.
Yes.
And so the overall traffic and retargeting has also dropped.
Yeah. And obviously they stopped doing Google shopping ads for a period of time, didn't they?
Right. Yep.
They did.
Hey guys, that's it for part 1. Please rejoin us in a couple of days' time. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.